In this video, I'm going to show you how to use GeoDjango, which is a geographic web framework that allows you to do a lot of cool GIS stuff, but we're going to keep it simple initially and just show you how to take a shapefile, import it into a Postgres database, and then display that map data in the Django admin console. So it's a big one. Let's go ahead and get on into the tutorial. All right, I'm going to be using a remote server in the cloud running Ubuntu in this tutorial. I'm going to show you how to set up that server. I actually have account credits down below that you can use to set up a free server for yourself in the cloud as well. Otherwise, you can use your own system, but some of the commands might be a little bit different since I'll be using Ubuntu. So go ahead and skip forward if you have your own system. Otherwise, let's set up our remote server. And I'm going to do that with DigitalOcean. So once you're here, you can create a droplet. And our droplet's going to be located in Singapore for me because I'm located in Kuala Lumpur, and that's the closest data center to me physically. So pick the one closest to you. Like I said, we're going to be using Ubuntu. Latest version 22.10 is good. We don't need too much resources, so we'll just pick a regular CPU with 1 gigabyte of RAM, 25 gigabytes of solid state drive storage. And then I'm gonna pick a password. Okay, and the only other thing I need to do on this page is to rename my host name. You can choose whatever you want. I'm just gonna call mine Ubuntu. Okay, so click on create droplet. That's gonna go ahead and create your virtual private server in the cloud somewhere, and when that's finished, we'll catch back up with you. Our Ubuntu server is up and running at this IP address, so I'm gonna copy that. And what I'm going to do on my Mac is open up a terminal window to log into this remote server via SSH. If you're on Windows, I have other videos about getting set up with SSH on Windows. Pretty much all we have to do is type in SSH. The user we're going to be operating under initially is root. And then we're just going to do at that IP address that we copied, hit enter. The first time we connect is going to ask, are you sure you want to connect? We can type yes, hit enter. And now that password that we just created, which I have saved over here, I'm going to copy and paste that into the terminal window, hit enter, and now we are on our remote Ubuntu system. So first thing I want to do is to install the Postgres database. Okay, so there's also an extension called PostGIS, which includes Postgres. Let's go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what I mean. So we'll do a sudo apt install PostGIS, hit enter. And this is not only going to install PostGIS, but all the dependencies, all this good stuff, and most importantly, PostgreSQL version 14 with PostGIS version 3. So that's 84 new packages. Let's go ahead and hit enter and let that do the install. Okay, now that we have Postgres installed, let's set up our database. And first thing we're going to do is switch over to the Postgres user. Right now we're using the root user. Whoops. Not sure what happened there. Let me put this back to a normal, reasonable size. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna switch over to the Postgres user. And you can see that happen instantly. Instead of root before, now we're Postgres. And what we're gonna do is to create a database. And the database that I'm gonna choose to name it is gonna be GISDB. So my database name is gonna be GISDB. So we'll execute that, and that database has been created. And now let's configure that database. And to do that, we'll access the Postgres shell with PSQL, and we want to access that with the GISDB. So we'll hit enter. And now all these commands will be Postgres commands. So there's a few things we want to do. I'm going to use my cheat sheet over here to copy and paste them in. So we want to create the extension PostGIS, which if you remember, that's the extension for Postgres. Associate that with this database. We're going to create a user. My database user is going to be called George. He's going to have the password geography is fun. And a few other things here. We are going to set the default client encoding to UTF-8. We're going to set the transaction isolation to read committed. Don't worry about too much what these mean. We're going to set the time zone to UTC. And then we're going to grant privileges, all privileges on the database to George. So that's all been set up. That's a once and done process. We'll go ahead and exit out of the Postgres shell and exit out of operating under the Postgres user. So now we are back to running under root, which on that note, root is not a good user to operate under to make a Django database under. So let's make a new user with the add user command, and I'm going to make a user with the username Tony, and I'm going to give him a password, confirm my password, and give him a name, and all this other stuff is pretty much optional, so you can just click enter or hit enter. Is the information correct? Yes, hit enter. Okay, so we now have that user created. Let's give that user sudo privileges so we can install additional packages as necessary. So we can do user mod -a capital G sudo Tony to give that user sudo privileges. And now let's switch on over to that user. So su-Tony. And now you can see instead of root, we are operating under Tony. All right, so let's install some more packages here. We need Django, we need Python, and we need a way for Python to talk to Postgres. So we can do that with sudo apt install python 3-django, and then we also want python 3-psycopg2. Do you want to continue? Go ahead and type enter, and we'll let that do its thing. It's now time to set up our Django project, and we can do that with the Django admin command, and we'll pass it start project, and then you can call your project whatever you want. I'm going to call mine GIS. And what that does is creates this GIS folder. So let's go into that folder, and in here we have another GIS subdirectory, which we'll be looking at in a bit, and this manage.py file, which is going to allow us to interact with our Django project. So let's actually use that right now. We'll type in Python 3 manage.py start app, and I'm going to call the app within my project world. So you can have multiple apps within a Django project, but in our case, we're just going to have one app, and I'm going to call mine world. So let's do that. And I spelled start app wrong. It's STARTAPP. So we'll try that again. And what that command does is creates another subdirectory under here called world. And in here we have a few different Python files. A couple of them we'll be looking at throughout this tutorial is admin.py and models.py. So we'll do that later on, but for now, there are a couple settings within the GIS subdirectory that we have to change. So inside of the GIS subdirectory, we have this settings.py file. So let's open that, and you can choose whatever text editor you want. If you're not familiar with Vim, I recommend to use Nano. So I'm going to open up that file. And in this file, there is a section called databases. And here's that section. So we basically want to tell Django about the Postgres database that we set up. So we'll get rid of these two lines, which default to a SQLite database. And instead of that, I'm going to paste in these few configuration lines, which basically says the engine that we're going to use is a PostGIS backend, which is actually built into Django. The name of our database, which we created earlier, was GISDB. Our username for the database is George. His password is geography is fun, and this is going to be hosted on the local host, which is the server that we're on right now. So that's one setting that we want to change. The other one is down here in installed apps. Oh, nope, it's up above. Okay, here is the installed apps setting. So we added an app called GIS to our Python project, so we want to make Django aware of that. So let's do GIS here. And we also want to leverage the Django GIS package, app, I should say. So we're also going to include in this list django.contrib.gis. All right, let's save that file, and at this point, it's time to start looking at the data that we're going to be working with. So I'm going to open up my web browser and go to naturalearthdata.com. This is an open source set of data that we can download here. Let's go to the Downloads tab, and they have large scale, medium scale, small scale, and they have a couple different options: cultural, physical, and raster. We're actually going to be working with the cultural data set, which defines country borders, and actually below that too, sometimes they have, as depending on how specific you want to get, they do have states and provinces, and for some data sets like the United States, I believe they have counties as well. But we're going to start with a high level countries view, and specifically we're going to look at sovereign countries. Okay, so this data set with 209 sovereign states. So what we're going to do, let's download this locally on our computer first and look at it in GIS software, and then just to explore it, get familiar with it, and then we'll work with it in Python. So let's go ahead and download that. And that downloads as a zip file, so I'm going to extract that and open it up. And what do we got in here? We got some bunch of different files, but the one that we're interested in is this shape file. So let's open that with an open source GIS software called QGIS. So we'll do that. And this is a basic overview of the data. So you have countries, all these sovereign countries with their outlines that are clickable. Each one of these corresponds to a row in the data table and has all these different metadata associated with it. So if we right click on the shapefile and go to the attribute table, we can see each one of these countries in here. So let's take a look at Kenya, right? So we can click on the Kenya row, right click on it and pan to that feature, zoom to that feature, and this country right here is Kenya, and looks like it got that one right. So you get the point. Let's minimize this and pull that data into our Python Django project. So I'm gonna get out of here, and we want to pull this data onto our server. So we can right click this and copy the link address, which as you can see down here is a zip file. So let's copy that, minimize this, and in our Django project, let's make a new directory inside the world directory. Let's make a directory in here called maps. Let's go into that directory and let's use the wget command to download that zip file. So you can do wget and then paste the path to that zip file, hit enter, and that's going to go ahead and download that onto our remote Ubuntu server. So here is that zip file. Let's unzip that file to extract it, but we need to first install the unzip command. So we can do that with sudo apt install unzip. Okay, now that we have the unzipped command, let's unzip it with unzip and then pass it the name of the file that we want to unzip. So unzip, hit enter, and that has extracted that into a folder. I'm sorry, that's not a folder, into the individual files, including our shapefile, which is what we're interested in. Sorry guys, at this point I realized I made a mistake early in the tutorial. Let me show you what I mean. Inside of our GIS subdirectory, there is the installed apps section in our settings.py file where I said that we installed an app called GIS, which was wrong. Our app name was World. Our Django project name was GIS. So we want to change that from GIS to World and save that. And now we can continue the tutorial by pulling in that shapefile to our Django project. So to do that, make sure you are in the root of your Django project, and we're going to use the manage.py command to do that. So let's go and type python 3 manage.py, and we're going to use a command called ogrinspect to pull that shapefile in. So this takes quite a few arguments, so let's make sure we get it right. So the first argument is the path to the shapefile. So that's located at world maps and then natural earth admin 0 sovereignty dot shape. Now the second one is going to be the name of the Django model that we want to use. So I'm going to call my Django model country because each row in that table represents a country. Okay. The next argument is -- mapping, and then -- multi, -- name - field is going to be name, and -- null true. Okay, so there's a lot to explain here. A couple important ones are the name field. We're pulling that out of the attribute table that we saw. There's a column in there called name, so that's going to be the name of the individual row, whatever country we're looking at, that's going to be the name. We want to explicitly allow null values because some of the columns don't have values for some of the rows. So null equals true, and that looks good. So let's see if that works. Let's execute that command, and that prints out basically two different things. Okay, so the second part right here, every single column in our shapefile is being mapped to what it's going to be considered in our database, in our Postgres database. So that's the country mapping. So that's the second part. And the first part is defining a Django model for that shapefile. So we basically want to take this first part all the way up to here, copy that, go into our world, sorry, not the apps, into world, and then our models.py file, and we're gonna get rid of everything in here and paste that in. So what did we just do? We created a Django model, which is a representation of the database in here for the country. So basically think of this as a good way to interact with the database via Python. So let's save that file. And now we have this second half of the file that we have to do something with, which is the country mapping. So I'm going to copy that. And basically at this part of the tutorial, we're going to be following pretty closely to this tutorial on the official Django documentation website, where we create this Python script where we define our mapping between the model and the database, and then we give it a path to the shapefile, and then we run it. We run that command to pull in row by row each one of those countries into our Postgres database. So we're going to take that again one step at a time. So let's, as it says here, let's create a file called load.py with this data in it. So I'm going to do that inside of world load.py, open that up, and then I'm going to add a few spaces up top here and paste that in. Now, right below that in the example that they have here, you want to specify the path to your shapefile on your computer, and I have already done that in my cheat sheet over here. So our country shape file is located up a level in the maps directory, and it is called this .shape. Okay, so a couple other things we have to do in here. We want to grab this and make some modifications to it. This is our function that's going to actually do the heavy lifting for us and import that shape file. And we have to change a few things. So instead of world shape, we called it country shape. Instead of world border, we simply called it country. That's the name of our model. And instead of world mapping, our dictionary above is called country mapping. So I think that looks good. Let's go to the top of our file and pull in what we need to pull in like they do in the example here. So we'll copy this, paste it in up top, and again, instead of world border, our model is called country. So from, basically this is saying from the current directory that we're in, we have a file called models.py, and in that file there is a definition for what a country model looks like. So I think that looks good. Let's save that, and best way to find out is to run it to see if it works. So a couple other things we have to do before we do that though. Like I said, this is a long tutorial. So basically we didn't really interact with the database yet. We have to tell the Postgres database about our definitions of what a country is and all that good stuff. And Django takes care of all of that stuff, so we don't have to know any SQL language or database language to do that. We can just tell Django that we want that to happen, and Django's going to take care of that behind the scenes. So in order to do that, we can type python 3 manage.py make migrations, and that's going to go ahead and, as it says here, it created the model called country, which it just looked in our models.py file to see what that definition looks like. And in order to actually apply those changes to the database, we can do python 3 manage.py migrate. Hit enter, and that's going to go ahead and actually commit those changes to our Postgres database. Okay, so we're now at the time where we can pull in the actual shapefile data into our Django database. So let's do that. We can do that with python 3 manage.py shell, and this is going to open a Python shell where we can execute Python commands now. And in here we want to do from world import load. So this is basically, like I said, there's a subdirectory called world, and inside there is a file called load.py, which we just created. So we're going to pull that in here, and load has a function in there called run. We created that as well. So when we run that, it's going to execute that command and pull in all the individual records from the shapefile. So let's see if that works. Hit enter, and it is one by one saving each country to our database. Okay, that has finished up. It pulled in all those countries, and let's confirm that. Let's interact with our database with Python, and this is where the true power of Django shines because, like I said earlier, you don't have to know any database languages or anything like that. You could just use Python to see what data you have in your database. So from world.models import country. Okay, so that's kind of what we did up top. We took a shortcut. We did from .models import country, but we can be explicit and say from world.models import country if I spell it right. Okay, so now we have access to that. So we can see all of our countries, or at least get a count of them. So let's do country.objects.all, or I'm sorry, country.objects.count, and that's going to say that we have 209 countries. So that looks good so far. Let's do country.objects.all. That's just going to give us this truncated list of all the countries, and that looks good too. Let's get a single country. Let's do country.objects.get name equals Italy. And that's going to return the country object for Italy. One of the columns in there was population estimate, so we can access that with the property pop_est. And there's your population estimate for Italy, which looks like 6 million or so. We can also filter the data. So let's do country.objects.filter continent equals Europe. And that's going to reach, oops, I missed the S on objects there. So we'll do country.objects.filter continent equals Europe. And that again displays that truncated list of all European countries. But let's get a count. Country.objects.Europe count. And that returns 45 countries, which sounds about right. Let's shift gears now and look at some actual map data. Okay, I want to see a map on my screen. So let's get out of our Python shell here with exit, and Django comes built in with a web server, and we can start that web server up with Python 3 manage.py run server. And because I'm working on a remote server, I'm going to pass in 0.0.0.0, which allows the Django web server to listen on all public IP addresses with the port 8000. So when we execute that, I can come back into, well, not that one, I can come back into DigitalOcean where I set up my server, copy this IP address, open a new tab, go to that IP address, :8000, and that's going to load our Django website. Not quite yet. We have to change one thing in our settings.py file. We have to add our IP address to allowed host. So let's do that quick. Close out of our server with Control-C, open up the GIS settings.py file, and in here, I think it's at the top, allowed hosts. It's empty right now, so let's add our IP address to that, save it, run our server again, and now we can load the page and we see the default Django admin landing page, or not admin landing page. We're going to look at that now. So yes, this is the default public landing page. If you go to that same URL /admin, you will see a way to log into the admin site. And by default, there isn't a user for that. We have to create that user. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll Control-C out of here. We can do Python manage.py create super user. Oops, Python 3 manage.py create super user. And I'm going to use the username Tony, give him an email, which honestly really doesn't matter. And then password, confirm that. Okay, and now we can use those credentials to log in. So let's start back up our admin site, or our Django development server. And then we can try to log into the admin site. So we'll give it the username Tony, which I just created, and the password, log in. And now this is our admin site. So by default, our model, our country model is not displayed in here. So we have to actually enable that. So let's go do that. Inside of our world directory, we have the admin.py file. And in here, we have to register our model. So let's do that. It's really simple. We'll get rid of all this and say from models import country, and then admin.site.register country. So this is basically registering our country model with the admin site. So we'll save that, start up our development server, reload the page for our admin site, and now we can see access to our countries. So let's click on countries. And we do see a whole bunch of list of countries. There's 209 countries, which checks out. Let's look at one of these. Let's look at, which one do we know? Singapore. All right, there's all your metadata associated with Singapore, such as the sovereignty, short 3-letter code for that, the official name, Republic of Singapore, and then all the way down here at the bottom, we see that shape of the country, the border of Singapore, and you can zoom out and see that with context with the entire world. Let's try one more. Let's do New Zealand. So same type of thing, all that metadata. And down here at the very bottom, we see that GIS map data with New Zealand highlighted. In the next video right here, I'm going to show you how to make a public-facing website where each country has its own page with the name of the country and a map.